Welcome to my playthrough of France 1944, the Allied Crusade in Europe, game design Mark Herman. This is the designer signature edition. This game starts with the Allied forces in Normandy just before the breakout, and then it follows the breakout, the drive across France, approaching the border of Germany, crossing the Rhine, and driving across Germany. There actually are several scenarios. I think there's 4 scenarios, and the difference between scenarios is when they end. One scenario basically is just the breakout. Then there's a scenario which is basically through September, which is the market garden is what they call it, basically trying to get a bridgehead across the Rhine. The next scenario is they call the West Wall, which is you have to get across the Rhine, but you have to have more bridgeheads across the Rhine. And the last scenario is ending in VE Day, which means you have to get across Germany and kind of in a race with the Soviets. So how you play the game will probably depend on which scenario you choose, but they all start in the same way. The things that really make this game unique. This is one of them. This is a movement expenditure track. And the interesting thing about this is basically when you select an army to move, you choose one of these tracks and it determines what you can do. These spots that have a number on them are basically potential attack or movement boxes. The number is the movement allowance of the unit that can attack in that. So basically 2+ means everybody can. 4+ means infantry and armor tends to be able to attack, and 6 basically means it has to be an armored unit to be able to attack. But just because it says there's possible attack in there doesn't mean it will. You could use it for movement or attack, and these numbers across the top are basically how much movement you get depending on what kind of unit you are. And there's 2, the movement allowance is 6, 4, 3, or 2, so that's armor, infantry, slower infantry, or parachute. The next number is if you're in normal mode, which are how many movement points you can use. In this case, it's 2 for everybody. And there's also kind of what they call administrative mode, which is basically reserve slash strategic movement setting, which means you can move faster. So basically, if you want to have a breakout, which tends to be what we're doing at first, you might want to do this track here because you have 3 chances to attack. But hopefully we'll get into these more often and get into some details here. But I think this is one of the more interesting things and kind of attracted me to the game in the first place. It's a very interesting combat results table. Basically, you'll roll 2 dice and you'll get some results. And you'll either, there's one die that says how much damage you're going to take. So it can be anywhere from 1 hit to 3 hits from the die. And then another die, basically you roll to see whether you make your morale rating. Here's an example of the basic units in the game. There's Canadian infantry. The first number is basically the morale rating. It's kind of also kind of a rating of how effective the unit is in general. The second number is movement, so that's an infantry unit, has 4 movement points. The next numbers, the 8 and the 2, are 2 combat factors. The top factor is for static positions, and the bottom one, the 2, is for mobile. And so basically most of the battles will be static, but there are occasions when you can get a mobile battle going and then the rating changes. So there's German armored unit. It has a movement of 6. German infantry with a movement of 3. You can see that the armored units tend to have better mobile ratings. The infantry units tend to have better static ratings. And then this is a headquarters unit in its not active stage. So basically it has a range that it can affect units and a movement allowance of 6. So on your turn, if you activate a unit or activate a headquarters, basically in this case it's a German unit. If you draw one of these, you can activate an army. So in this case you have an army that can activate 7 armored units. In this game the armored units are divisions. The infantry units are basically corps. So in this headquarters could activate 4 armor and armor divisions and 3 infantry corps within range 4. And once they're activated, they can move or attack using that chart we showed before. So for example, if those 2 German units want to attack that Canadian unit, first thing they do is decide which unit's going to lead, which basically is which morale rating you're going to use. So in this case, you might want to use the armored unit. It's rated a 4. You attack the infantry units rated a 4. So basically, what happens here is you roll the dice, as I said before. For instance, if you rolled 4 in this case, the offensive would pass, assuming no other adjustments. And then perhaps you rolled a 2 for the hits against the offensive unit, and maybe you rolled a 1 for the hits on the defensive unit, and maybe they rolled a 2, in which case they both pass. And then we'll look at the chart and we can see how to interpret that. For the battle we just outlined, we had both defense and offense pass their morale checks, basically. So you basically look at this grid, and so it says successful defense. This is also on the set piece side. Successful attack. So basically we have standoff. And then for the set piece battle, we look at the top of this thing, and you notice that it says for various odds the attacker may have to take 1 more hit or lower number of hits. The defender may end up having an extra hit. And then this middle section basically says kind of conditions on whether the defender has to retreat or not. So in this case, they'd have to, if the attacker's modified morale was greater than the defender's leading its modified morale, they'd have to retreat. Otherwise, they kind of basically have an option to retreat to reduce hits. So depending on who passes and who doesn't, you look in a different box, and then each box has different effects that might happen. So we'll probably get into this a little more as we go along. At least at the beginning, I'll try to show things in detail and kind of get less detailed as we go, hopefully. And you can see how crowded the game starts off at. It starts with a lot of depth per units. In the Deluxe edition, they gave you this nice little board you can use to spread your units out a little bit when you first start. It's also for the first introductory game. You can basically play the whole game on this board. It actually has two sides, one with setup, which may be a little cluttered. I'm not sure that I'll use that for this. But it also has kind of more of a blank board. So I think I'll use that. I'll set this up and hopefully we can get started. And as I say, I'll try to explain rules as we go. As they come up, there's some Chrome for crossing the Rhine and V1s and the Brittany campaign. Also a little interesting setup for the invasion of southern France. And hopefully this will be entertaining.